My name is Eleanor Vance. For 42 years, I have lived in the same salt-bleached cedar-shingled house in Port Blossom, a small coastal town in Maine where the fog has a personality and the rhythm of life is dictated by the tides. My husband, Richard, and I bought this house when it was a neglected relic and we were a young couple with more dreams than dollars. He was the sailor, the one with a booming laugh and eyes the color of the sea on a clear day. I was the quiet one, the strategist, the one who saw the patterns in the waves and the markets. Together, we built Ashworth Maritime Solutions from a single leaky fishing boat and a desk in our spare bedroom into a respected international shipping and logistics firm. Richard passed 3 years ago. The cancer was swift and merciless, stealing the wind from his sails and leaving behind a silence in this old house that was heavier than any fog. In the quiet that followed, I learned that grief is not a storm to be weathered, but a tide that ebbs and flows, sometimes leaving you gasping on the shore, sometimes gently rocking you in its melancholic embrace. I was contemplating this very thing, arranging a bouquet of wild lupins I'd gathered from the roadside, when the sound of a German luxury sedan crunched on my gravel driveway. The engine, a low, aggressive purr, always sounded out of place here, a city sound intruding on the quiet symphony of gulls and distant foghorns. It was my son, Liam. He and his fiancée, Chloe, only visited when they wanted something, and the length between visits had grown steadily longer. Through the kitchen window, I watched him get out, all sharp angles and restless energy in his tailored suit. Chloe emerged from the passenger side, a vision of polished perfection, her movements precise and her smile a carefully constructed accessory. She clutched a sleek leather portfolio to her chest like a shield. Whatever this was, she was the navigator. The doorbell chimed, a crisp, impatient sound. I took a deep, steadying breath, the scent of the lupins a small comfort, and walked to the door. My heart, a veteran of so many of life's battles, braced for a new kind of disappointment. Eleanor, Liam said, his gaze flicking past me into the house. He didn't use the word mom anymore unless he was trying to soften a blow. He and Chloe stepped inside without an invitation, their city presence, her expensive perfume, his restless energy, filling my quiet entryway. "Hello, Chloe," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "Eleanor," she replied, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "It's so good to see you." I led them into the living room, a space filled with memories. It was where Liam had learned to walk, where Richard and I had celebrated our 30th anniversary. Now, my son stood in its center like a stranger, his eyes assessing the worn oriental rug and the faded armchair as if they were liabilities on a balance sheet. "Can I get you some tea? I just brewed some peppermint." It was a familiar ritual, an anchor of normalcy in what I already knew would be a turbulent conversation. "We don't have time for a social call," Liam said, his tone clipped. "We need you to sit down. There's something important we need to discuss." My legs felt a bit unsteady as I lowered myself into Richard's old armchair, its familiar contours a small comfort. Chloe sat on the sofa opposite me, placing her portfolio on the antique coffee table with a decisive thud. Liam remained standing, a prosecuting attorney preparing to address the jury. "The company has been sold," he stated, the words delivered with the flat finality of a weather report. The lupins in my hand trembled slightly. "Sold? Liam, what are you talking about?" Chloe opened her portfolio, revealing a thick sheaf of documents. "The deal was finalized yesterday morning," she said, her voice smooth and professional. "Liam has been managing the acquisition process for the last 6 months. It's a very strong offer." My gaze fell on the papers, the dense legal text blurring before my eyes. Ashworth Maritime. The company Richard and I had poured our souls into, the legacy we had built knot by knot, deal by deal. Gone. "But I'm the majority shareholder," I whispered, the words feeling foreign in my own mouth. Liam let out a short, impatient sigh. "Eleanor, you haven't been actively involved in day-to-day operations since Dad died. You don't understand the current market dynamics, the new technologies, the regulatory hurdles. You sign the checks." "That's not true," I said, but my voice was a faint echo against the walls of his certainty. "Look at yourself," Chloe interjected, her voice softening into a tone of feigned sympathy that was more insulting than any anger. "You're struggling. The bills pile up on your counter. You forget appointments. Just last week, you called Liam 3 times to ask about the same quarterly tax filing." A flush of heat crept up my neck. I had called him, yes. Not because I'd forgotten, but because I was lonely. Because the silence of the house had been particularly loud that day, and I'd wanted to hear my son's voice, to feel connected to the world we had once shared. Liam pulled a side chair closer, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. He was trying to look earnest, concerned. "You're 66 years old, Eleanor. The company needs dynamic leadership. I can't stand by and watch you let Dad's legacy slowly rust away at the docks." "The company is profitable," I stated, finding a small piece of solid ground. "The fourth quarter reports were excellent." "The reports are coasting on momentum Dad established years ago," Liam shot back. "The industry is consolidating. We need to be aggressive, nimble. You still use a paper ledger for some of your accounting." "We're not trying to hurt you, Eleanor," Chloe added, her voice a silken balm. "We're trying to secure your future." The buyer offered a price far above market value. "The money will ensure you're comfortable for the rest of your life. No more stress, no more worries." I looked from my son's face to his fiancé's, searching for a trace of the boy who used to bring me sea glass treasures from the beach. I found only a man who looked at me with a strained patience, as if I were a problem to be managed. "How much?" I asked, my voice quiet. Liam and Chloe exchanged a glance. $5 million, he said. "After taxes and brokerage fees, you'll have just over $3.5 million deposited into your account." It was a good price for what he thought he was selling. A very good price. But the number was irrelevant. "You sold our life's work without consulting me." "I'm consulting you now," he said, his tone making it clear that my signature was a mere formality. "I'm asking you to sign these documents, to ratify the sale and acknowledge that it was in the company's best interest." Chloe leaned forward again. "Think of it, Eleanor. No more late-night calls about a shipment stuck in customs. No more stress about fuel prices or union negotiations. You can travel. You can finally take that art history class you always talked about. You can focus on your garden." Liam stood and paced to the window, his back to me. When he turned around, his face was a hard mask. "The truth is, Eleanor, you've become a burden. Ever since Dad died. You call me constantly with questions a first-year business student could answer. You second-guess every strategic move I propose, clinging to outdated methods. I can't build a future while I'm constantly managing the past." Burden. The word landed in the quiet room and stayed there, a toxic cloud. It didn't break me. Instead, something inside me, something that had been dormant and grieving for 3 years, began to solidify. It felt like ice forming on a winter sea, cold and clear and strong. "I sold Dad's company because it was the only way to save it," Liam continued, his voice rising with self-justification. "And it's the only way to save you from yourself. Good luck paying the property taxes on this place now. On a fixed income, a house this size will bleed you dry." Chloe shot him a warning glance, but the damage was done. "You're my son," I said, the words a simple statement of fact. "And you're my mother," he retorted. "Which is why I'm doing this. Someone has to be the adult in the room, and it's obviously not you anymore." I sat in that chair, in the gathering twilight, my world tilting on its axis. And then it settled. The storm had passed, and I was in the eye. A place of profound and terrible clarity. When I finally looked up, they were both watching me, expecting tears, or arguments, or a guilt-laden appeal to family. "All right," I said, my voice even. Liam blinked. "What?" I said, "All right. Good luck." I rose from the chair, my movements slow and deliberate. I walked to the coffee table. "I assume you need me to sign." Chloe, flustered by my compliance, fumbled with a pen. Yes. Here and here. And initial this page." My hand was perfectly steady as I signed my name, Eleanor Vance, on the lines she indicated. I handed the pen back and walked toward the front door. "That's it?" Liam called after me, his voice laced with disbelief. "You're not going to fight? No lecture about what Dad would have wanted." I turned at the door, my hand on the cool brass knob. "Would it change your mind, Liam?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. The silence was his answer. I didn't think so, I said. Have a wonderful time in Paris. I hear the spring is lovely this time of year. Chloe's eyes widened. How did you know we were going to Paris? A small, genuine smile touched my lips for the first time that day. Oh, my dear, I said. I know a great many things you think I don't. After they left, the silence that returned to the house was different. It was not the empty silence of loss, but the charged silence of potential. It was the quiet before a dawn you have been long awaiting. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. Samuel, it's Eleanor. I believe it's time. Samuel arrived less than an hour later, his kind, weathered face a welcome sight. He was my lawyer, but more than that, he had been Richard's best friend and my steadfast confidant for 30 years. He set his worn leather briefcase on the floor and settled into the sofa without ceremony. So, he said, his voice gentle. The prodigal son made his move. Word for word, just as we anticipated, I replied, pouring him a cup of the peppermint tea I had offered Liam. My hands, I noticed, were no longer shaking. He called me a burden, Samuel. I said the word aloud, testing its weight again. Samuel shook his head, his brow furrowed with a mixture of sorrow and anger. I'm sorry, Eleanor. I know we prepared for this possibility, but the hearing of it must have stung. The capacity for my son to disappoint me ceased to be a surprise some time ago, I said, sitting in my armchair. What is surprising is his utter lack of curiosity. Shall we review? Samuel asked, opening his briefcase. I nodded, though I knew the details as intimately as I knew the lines on my own hands. We had been laying this groundwork for nearly 3 years, ever since Richard's funeral, when Liam had first suggested I was becoming overwhelmed by my responsibilities. It began in 1981, I started, the story now a familiar narrative. Richard and I were 24, with a loan from my father and Richard's boundless optimism. He was the face of the company, the man who could charm a banker or a skeptical harbor master with a single story. Men in those days, especially in the maritime world, wanted to deal with other men. So you let Richard be the captain, Samuel prompted, while you charted the course. I rose and went to the heavy oak bookshelf, retrieving a framed photo from behind a row of nautical histories. It was of Richard and me at the christening of our first major vessel, the Eleanor V. He was smashing the champagne bottle against the bow, his face split by a grin. I was standing just behind him, my hand on his arm, smiling, but my eyes were on the shipwright, ensuring the work had been done to my exact specifications. I was always watching the details, I murmured. Richard worked the room, I worked the ledgers. He negotiated the handshakes, I structured the contracts to protect us from the fine print. The company structure, on paper, he owned 60%, I owned 40%. It was a concession to the times, to the banks. But the real value, Samuel said, was never in the name on the door. The real value, I confirmed, was in the assets. The international shipping licenses, the intellectual property for our proprietary logistics software, the commercial real estate we acquired at the ports in Savannah and Long Beach. And those, I said, returning to my chair, were always held separately. The Seabrook Trust, Samuel said, nodding. Exactly. Richard and I established it 10 years ago when he first got sick. We knew we had to protect the core of what we'd built. 75% of the company's actual assets, the patents, the real estate, the international partnerships, were transferred into the trust. I am its sole trustee and beneficiary. And Liam knows nothing of this. A small, sad laugh escaped me. Liam has spent the last 3 years so convinced of my incompetence that he never thought to look deeper than the surface. He was so eager to take the helm, he never bothered to check the sea charts. The afternoon sun slanted through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, golden secrets. I recalled another afternoon, almost a year ago, when I'd been in the garden just outside the office window. Liam had been inside, on the phone with Chloe. He was telling her the company's assets were all tied up in the operational side. I recounted to Samuel, the memory still sharp. He said, and I quote, "She's just a figurehead, bless her heart. She never really understood the financial architecture." He told Chloe that once he sold the old-fashioned parts of the business, they would be free. And that, Samuel concluded, making a note, is when you knew for certain. That was when I knew my son saw me not as a person, but as an obstacle to his inheritance. For my entire life, I had been the woman behind the man, the quiet force ensuring our success. I let Richard take the bows because his spirit needed the applause. I let Liam believe I was a fading, fragile widow because his ambition needed to feel like a rescue mission. But Richard knew, Samuel said softly. Richard always knew. My voice softened. The night before he went into the hospital for the last time, he took my hand. His own was frail, but his grip was firm. Ellie, he'd said, don't let that boy mistake your kindness for weakness. I did that for too long. You make sure he learns what you're really worth. Samuel leaned back, studying my face. And so, Liam has just sold what he believes is the entire company for $5 million. I smiled, and this time, it was a smile of pure, unadulterated irony. What he has sold is the American-based operational wing. The name, the domestic staff, and a handful of aging vessels. By my last valuation, it's about 25% of the company's total worth. The Seabrook Trust, as of this morning's market open, holds assets valued at approximately $25 million. Samuel let out a low whistle. Liam is so sure he understands modern business, I continued. But he doesn't understand the most fundamental principle. Know what you own before you sell it. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the rose bushes Richard had planted. Do you know what he said to me at Christmas? He said I was an analog woman in a digital world. I told him he was probably right. I turned back to Samuel. And then I finalized a digital logistics partnership in Singapore that's projected to increase our net profits by 15% this year alone. Samuel closed his folder. So, what happens next? Next, Liam and Chloe land in Paris. They'll be checking into the Hotel de Crillon. I know this because he used the company credit card to book the Imperial Suite. A little farewell gift to himself. A company credit card that is about to be declined. Precisely, I said, a flutter of anticipation in my chest. Along with the personal debit card linked to the account where he expects his multi-million-dollar wire transfer to appear. An account that will show a balance of approximately $0. And the phone calls? Samuel asked, a twinkle in his eye. I'm estimating the first one will arrive around 3 a.m. our time, I said. Knowing Liam, he won't be patient. Samuel packed his briefcase, but he didn't move to leave. Eleanor, are you sure? Once you set this in motion, the relationship with your son may never be the same. I looked at the photograph of Richard on the mantelpiece, his smile so full of life. I thought of his last words to me. Was I sure? Was I willing to risk a complete estrangement to teach my son the lesson his father had asked me to? Samuel, I said, my voice clear and steady. I lost my son the day he decided I was a burden. Everything that happens from now on is simply me reclaiming my dignity and my life's work. After Samuel left, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. For the first time since Richard's death, the house didn't feel empty. It felt like mine. I picked up my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and made another call. Carla, it's Eleanor Vance. Yes, it has been a while. I have a proposition for you. How would you feel about heading up our North American operations? As I spoke, laying out my vision for revitalizing the very part of the company Liam had just sold, I felt the last 3 years of grief and uncertainty fall away. I was no longer just Richard's widow or Liam's burdensome mother. I was Eleanor Vance, the woman who had charted the course all along. And tomorrow, my son would finally learn who was truly at the helm. The first call came at 3:12 a.m., Port Blossom time. I was sitting in my kitchen, a cup of chamomile tea warming my hands, watching the first faint hints of dawn touch the eastern sky. I had been awake for hours, not with anxiety, but with a calm, focused sense of anticipation. I let it ring 5 times before answering. Hello, Liam. Eleanor. His voice was tight, strained with an irritation he was trying to suppress. There's some kind of issue with the bank. A glitch, I think. The wire transfer from the sale hasn't come through. I took a slow sip of my tea. Oh? That's odd. Have you spoken with them? Of course I've spoken with them. The irritation frayed into panic. They're saying the destination account was closed yesterday afternoon. How can an account just be closed? I have no idea, dear, I said placidly. As you've so often pointed out, complex financial matters are really beyond my grasp. I could hear Chloe's voice in the background, high and sharp. What does she mean? Tell her to fix it. Liam muffled the phone, but her frantic words still carried. His voice, when it returned, was dangerously controlled. Eleanor, I need you to call Samuel. Now. There's been a clerical error. The $5 million needs to be accessible. I'll certainly give him a call in the morning, I said. It's the middle of the night here, Liam. I'm sure it can wait until business hours. No, it can't wait. The control shattered. We're in Paris. I've put a hold on the suite with my credit card, but it's been declined. All our cards have been declined. I made a soft, sympathetic clucking sound. That does sound stressful. I hope you brought traveler's checks. There was a stretch of charged silence, filled only by the sound of Liam's ragged breathing. When he spoke again, his voice was a low growl. Eleanor, I am going to ask you one more time. Call your lawyer and find out where my money is. Your money. I repeated the words slowly, savoring them. I wasn't aware you had any money, Liam. The money from the sale. My inheritance. The $5 million that is supposed to be in my account. I set my teacup down on its saucer with a delicate clink. Oh, that money. Yes. It's perfectly safe. I could hear the whoosh of his relieved exhale. Thank God. So where is it? What's the holdup? It's in my account, I said simply. The Seabrook Trust account, to be precise. Where it will remain. The silence that followed was so absolute I thought the call might have dropped. Then, a strangled sound, barely a whisper. What did you just say? I said, the proceeds from the sale are in my trust account. You sold a portion of Ashworth Maritime, Liam. A portion that was legally yours to sell. And per the corporate bylaws, which you apparently never read, all proceeds from the sale of any corporate assets revert to the parent trust. That's not possible, he sputtered. I had lawyers review everything. They reviewed the documents you gave them, I said calmly. Did you give them the charter for the Seabrook Trust? Or the filings for our holding companies in Delaware and Savannah? Or the international patent assignments? I heard a clatter as he dropped the phone. Chloe's voice, now right next to the receiver, was shrill. Mrs. Vance, what is going on? What is this nonsense about a trust? Hello, Chloe. How is the Imperial Suite? Never mind the suite. Liam is telling me you've stolen his inheritance. One cannot steal what was never owned, my dear, I replied. You see, when you spend 40 years building a global enterprise, you learn to protect its core. You learn that the most valuable parts of a ship are below the waterline, hidden from view. Liam's voice returned, shaking with a potent cocktail of rage and dawning horror. Mom, you can't do this. I'm your son. This is my legacy. Your father's legacy, Liam, was integrity, hard work, and respect for the people who worked alongside him. A legacy you were prepared to sell to a corporate vulture fund that would have liquidated the assets and fired every single employee within a year. How did you know that? Because unlike you, I do my due diligence. I know that the buyer, Triton Acquisitions, has a history of exactly that. I've spoken with them. They were quite frank about their plans for optimizing operational efficiencies. I let that sink in. Tell me, Liam, how are you planning to tell Margaret, who has been our bookkeeper for 25 years, that her pension was gone? That's just business, he stammered. No, Liam. That is cruelty. And that is what I have protected this company from. I have protected it from you. You planned this, he whispered, the accusation devoid of its earlier force. All of it. I prepared for it, I corrected gently. There is a difference. I hoped every single day that you would prove me wrong. I hoped you would come to me as a partner, not a predator. I hoped you would see me as your mother, not your burden. I do see you as my mother, he cried, his voice cracking. No. You see me as an elderly woman you could easily manipulate. You and Chloe have spent the last year whispering about my cognitive decline, haven't you? Plotting how to take control before I ran the company into the ground. The silence was his confession. I could hear the sounds of the hotel lobby now, the murmur of French, the polite chime of an elevator. They must have been making this frantic call from a house phone, their public humiliation just beginning. "Mom, please," he said, his voice broken. "I made a mistake. I see that now. What do I do? How do I fix this?" For a fleeting moment, the old maternal instinct surged, the desire to soothe, to rescue, to make it all better. Then I remembered his face in my living room, the coldness in his eyes as he'd called me a burden. I remembered the legacy he had been so willing to desecrate. "You can start by figuring out how you and Chloe are going to pay for your hotel room and your flight home from Paris," I said, my voice quiet but unyielding. "Consider it your first lesson in real-world logistics. You can't just abandon us here." "I'm not abandoning you, Liam. I'm introducing you to a concept you've never had to face before: consequences. You wanted to be the man in charge? This is what it feels like when a deal goes wrong. Solve it." I hung up the phone and turned off the ringer. That was the 5th call. I had a feeling there would be many more. I poured myself another cup of tea and opened my laptop. There were emails from Singapore to answer and a new partnership in Germany to finalize. The sun was fully up now, painting the harbor in brilliant shades of pink and gold. It was a beautiful day to run a company. My company. By noon, my phone's log showed 37 missed calls from a variety of Parisian numbers. Liam had clearly been borrowing phones. The tone of the voicemails had journeyed through the entire spectrum of human desperation, from angry threats of lawsuits to rambling, tearful pleas. The 38th call came while I was in my garden, tending to the roses Richard had planted. This time I answered. "Hello, Liam." "Mom." His voice was hollow, stripped of all its earlier bravado. "We're coming home." I snipped a withered bloom from a bush. "Oh? And how are you managing that?" "I called Uncle David," he said, a note of shame in his voice. Richard's younger brother. A good man, but one who had always been a little in awe and a little resentful of our success. I could only imagine the version of the story Liam had told him. "That was resourceful of you," I said evenly. "We'll be there tomorrow night. We are going to sort this out face to face." "I'll be here," I said. "This is my home. And I'm going to fight you on this," he added, a last flicker of defiance. "I will prove you manipulated Dad." "Richard's legacy," I said, sitting on the small stone bench by the rose bushes, "is not a dollar figure in a bank account, Liam. It's the 43 families who draw a salary from Ashworth Maritime. It's the reputation for integrity we built over 4 decades. It's the scholarship fund we established for the children of our employees. You are going to sell all of that for a bigger house and a faster car. That's not honoring a legacy. That's selling a tombstone." I could hear Chloe in the background, her voice a furious whisper. He said something back, and then, "We'll see you tomorrow." He hung up. I knew what was coming. Legal challenges, accusations, the dredging up of family pain. What Liam didn't know was that I was prepared for that, too. I called Samuel. "Pull the video files," I said, my voice firm. For the last 2 years, I had kept a small, discreet security camera in the main office, and I had made a habit of recording important phone calls. Not out of malice, but out of a sad, prescient need for self-preservation. I had hours of evidence, Liam dismissing my ideas in meetings, telling his father I was losing a step, discussing with Chloe how to manage me. And more importantly, I had Richard's responses. Richard, on tape, telling his son, "Your mother's instincts have made us millions. You'd be wise to listen to her." Richard, explaining to Liam that the Seabrook Trust was established to protect the company's core from exactly the kind of short-sighted, profit-driven thinking he was exhibiting. If Liam wanted a war in a courtroom, he would find himself fighting not me, but the recorded words of the very father whose legacy he claimed to be protecting. That evening, as a storm rolled in off the Atlantic, I sat in my living room and reviewed the quarterly reports from the Seabrook Trust's holdings. The business was thriving. While Liam had been focused on the domestic operations, I had been nurturing our international growth. We were a global company, more successful and more stable than ever. He had tried to sell the ship, but he'd only managed to sell the dinghy tied to its stern. A text message lit up my phone. An unknown international number. "This isn't over. You've made the biggest mistake of your life." It had to be Chloe. I typed a reply. The biggest mistake of my life was allowing my son to believe that respect was an inheritance, not something to be earned. I am correcting that mistake now. Her reply was instant. He will never forgive you. I looked at her words, and a profound sense of peace washed over me. Good, I typed back. Then perhaps for the first time, we can begin to have an honest relationship. I turned off my phone, the rising wind and rain a fitting soundtrack to the tempest I had unleashed. Tomorrow, the storm would make landfall in my living room, and I would be ready to face it. Liam's rented sedan pulled into the driveway just after 7 the next evening. The car looked as weary as its occupants. Through the window, I watched them get out. Liam's suit was crumpled, his face pale and drawn. Chloe looked like a porcelain doll that had been dropped, her perfect facade shattered, revealing the fragile anger beneath. I let them knock twice before I opened the door. Eleanor, Liam began, trying to muster some authority. Come in, I said, stepping aside. They followed me into the living room, the scene of the crime, and the air was thick with unspoken accusations. My lawyer will be in touch tomorrow, Liam announced, standing stiffly in the center of the room. We are formally contesting the trust. That is your right, I said, gesturing to the sofa. Though he will likely advise you that challenging a well-established trust with clear testamentary intent is a costly and often futile exercise. You set me up. Chloe burst out, her voice trembling with rage. You let him believe he was a millionaire. We bought a house. The deposit is non-refundable. Your financial decisions based on unconfirmed funds are your own responsibility, Chloe, I said calmly. Stop it. Liam's voice cracked. Just stop being so calm. You stole my future. Did I? I picked up a thin file from the side table. Let's talk about the future, Liam. I opened it and took out a single sheet of paper. This is the employee roster for our domestic operations. 43 people. This, I said, adding another sheet, is the business plan from Triton Acquisitions, the company you sold to. I had a private investigator acquire it. They planned to terminate 35 of these positions within 90 days. Margaret, who held your hand when you visited the office as a child, would have been let go 2 months before she was eligible for her full retirement. Liam stared at the papers, his face ashen. But that's not all, I said, my voice steady. I took out my phone and played the audio file I had saved. The one of Liam on the phone with his father. Dad, I'm worried about Mom. She seems confused. Maybe it's time to let me handle things. And then Richard's voice, clear and strong. Son, your mother could navigate this company through a hurricane in the dark. If you think she's confused, it's you who isn't paying attention. I played another. This one of Liam and Chloe, their voices whispering in my kitchen last Christmas. The old lady has no idea what the offshore accounts are worth. Once we sell, we're set for life. She'll be so grateful we took this off her hands. When the recording ended, the silence in the room was absolute. Chloe was staring at Liam, her expression a mask of dawning horror and betrayal. You told me she was losing her mind, she whispered. You told me this was a mercy mission, to save her from herself. Liam stammered, looking from her face to mine. I was trying to protect our future. You were trying to steal from your own mother, Chloe said, her voice flat. She stood up, her movements jerky. And you lied to me to do it. She turned and walked toward the door without a backward glance. I'm done, Liam. I didn't sign up for this. The front door slammed shut. Liam sank onto the sofa, his head in his hands. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, a boy lost in the wreckage of his own making. He sat there for a long time. The rain beat against the windows. Finally, he looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed and full of a despair so profound it ached to watch. What do you want from me? He asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. I want you to answer a question, I said, my voice softening. Do you love me, or do you love what you thought I could give you? He stared at me, the question hanging in the air between us. He had no answer. He stood, defeated, and walked out of the house into the stormy night. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Liam. Mom, he said, his voice thick with unshed tears. Chloe left. She took the rental car. I'm at the bus station. I don't have anywhere to go. Here it was. The crossroads. I could rescue him, or I could let him learn. The guest room is made up, I said. The rent is $100 a week, payable in advance. And you'll be expected to help with the chores. $100? Mom, I don't have $100. I don't have anything. Then I suggest you start figuring out how to earn it, I said gently. The fishermen down at the pier are always looking for help mending nets. It's hard work, but it's honest. And it pays in cash at the end of the day. There was a long, stunned silence. You'd really make me do that? I'm not making you do anything, Liam. I am offering you a roof over your head and the opportunity to learn what your father and I learned when we were your age. That dignity isn't given. It's built, one day at a time, with your own two hands. I could hear him crying softly on the other end of the line. I'm your son, he choked out. Yes, you are, I said, my own eyes filling with tears. And it's long past time you learned what that truly means. 6 months later, I stood in my kitchen, watching the sunrise paint the harbor. The house was quiet, but it was a comfortable, lived-in quiet. The scent of fresh coffee filled the air. Morning, Mom. Liam walked in, dressed in work boots and jeans. His hands, once soft and manicured, were now calloused. He'd spent 2 months mending nets and swabbing decks before I'd offered him an entry-level position at Ashworth Maritime in the mailroom. Morning, I smiled. How did the inventory audit go yesterday? Finished ahead of schedule, he said, pouring himself a mug of coffee. I found a discrepancy in the Savannah warehouse manifests. Looks like we've been overcharged on storage fees for the last quarter. I've drafted an email for you to review. He had worked his way up from the mailroom to logistics assistant. He was diligent, humble, and for the first time in his life, curious. He asked questions not to challenge, but to learn. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence that was more impressive than any bravado had ever been. He sat down at the kitchen table, a place that had become our morning office. Mom, he said, looking at me directly. I've been thinking a lot about what you asked me that night. The question about whether I loved you or what you could give me. I waited, my heart still. For a long time, I don't think I knew the difference, he admitted, his gaze unwavering. I was so focused on the inheritance, the status. I saw you as the keeper of it, not as you. I am so sorry. I know, I said softly. I want to earn it back, he said. Your trust. Your respect. Not the company, not the money. Just that. Tears welled in my eyes, but these were tears of gratitude. You already are, Liam. Every single day. We sat in a comfortable silence, sipping our coffee as the new day dawned. I had risked losing my son to help him find himself. It was the hardest and most important business decision I had ever made. He had lost an inheritance and gained a character. I had lost the burden of his expectations and regained the son I had always hoped he would be. The journey had been a tempest, but here, in the quiet light of morning, the sea was calm. The tide had turned. Now, I turn the question to you, the one who has followed my story to its end. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to choose between what is easy and what is right in your own family? I'd be honored to read your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know the city you're in, so I can see how far this old sailor's tale has traveled. Thank you for listening.